Good morning and welcome back to Salam Media. The time is 8:43 and you're still tuned in to your home of humanitarian journalism. The story that we're going to do next, I think, is one that's very, very important. It's been 59 years since the forced removals that changed District 6 forever. The story of District 6 is one that I think can't be disassociated from South Africa's history. It's one of deep pain, resilience, and I think an ongoing fight for justice. And I think, just reading about this once thriving multicultural community in the heart of Cape Town, District 6, which was later declared a whites only area under the Group Areas Act in 1966, leading to the forced removals, essentially, of over 60,000 residents. Families were torn apart, homes destroyed, and a vibrant community was erased. Yet its spirit has never died. And today we remember the people of District 6, the struggle of restitution, and the long road still ahead for justice, even under this democratic dispensation. And joining us is Soraya Martheze, a former resident of Dry Rocks, an area which was part of District 6. And she'll be sharing with us her memories and reflections on this painful yet very, very powerful chapter in South Africa's history. Soraya, thank you so much for joining us on Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam rahmatullah.
I think first and foremost, we can start with your personal memories and experiences of what you can remember, from your childhood back in Dry Rocks. What was the community like before the forced removals, and what do you think made District 6 so unique at the time compared to other neighborhoods?
Okay, so I can only speak for the time that I lived there. I lived in District 6. I was born there, and I left when I was 11 years old. Very vibrant community. Dry Docks was on the outskirts of District 6, but it was part of District 6. But there was also a community, kind of on its own, very small community. They were situated immediately below what was then called the Vaal Drive. It's now Philip Skosana. But what I remember about my times there is, now you hear the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, Ubuntu. All of that is how I grew up. That was practiced all the time. Very diverse community. When it was Maghrib, even non-Muslim neighbors used to tell the Muslim children to go inside. I don't see that anywhere today at all. Neighbors cared for each other and for each other's families and for each other's children. But at that time, there was very little affluence. So classism didn't really exist.
I'm not sure if maybe you can remember, because I'm sure you were so small when it happened. But
Yeah.
when you and your family received the news that you had to leave, what do you remember about that time? And where were you and your family ultimately relocated to? And from what shared about how District 6 was like, and how your childhood was like in District 6 and Dry Dogs, how did life change after that for you after leaving District 6? What was the contrast like from what you were used to, this vibrant community that was had the values of Ubuntu, and everyone cared for each other, and it was so multicultural and everyone respected each other, to where you guys ultimately were relocated to? What are the contrasts between the two?
Okay, so I left around, the declaration was made in 1966. My parents got divorced, so I left with my mom around 1968 or 69. I'm not sure. And we moved to Buka. But I continued visiting my father, who still stayed in Dry Docks. So I saw, from my visits to him, I could see how the buildings disappeared and the demolition taking place. I moved to an area called Buka, which had similar values to District 6. I can only compare it to or now when I was grown up, moving to an area like Goodwood, where
Mm,
very few neighbors know each other's names. At the time when I lived in Dry Docks, our playground was the street. It was the pavement. The roads, we had cobbled roads. All our games were played there. We didn't
mm,
have parks. And
mm,
it's just sad for me. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter who coincidentally celebrated her third birthday also yesterday on the February 11th. Um, she doesn't have that privilege. Well, not just her, all the kids today, they don't have that. I went to school, all the schools I attended, I could walk to the school.
mm,
I could walk to the school, I could walk back home, I could walk to the shop, buy sweets, buy whatever my mother needed. Everything was at hand. My parents walked to work. We didn't own a car. They could walk to work and back. So it's very different to now. I'd
mm,
also moved to Mitchell's Plain, which is where many people were, I don't, thrown. I'd use the word thrown just to express the gravity of the situation.
mm.
Completely different. It was people from all over who were just dumped together. We didn't necessarily share the same values.
Mm, and I'm sure that was a very, very confusing time, and I think it can also be one of the reasons why there was an influx of violence and drugs in our communities, particularly those of us of color, because of that, because of these.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, because
Oh,
of these, movements and displacements of people from places that, they've called home for generations and generations. I want to touch on, the promise of land restitution. It has been a long and frustrating journey. Are you or do you know people who are still waiting to return? And what are the conversations like in those circles? And is there progress being made? To make sure that the people that have lost their land, have lost their homes, are ultimately compensated or are returned to the places that they've lost.
so sadly, yeah, the restitution process is extremely slow. I submitted my claim 1995 and I got the keys to the property. I'm back in District 6 in an area called Phase 3. So it was a 27-year wait. There are still thousands of people on the waiting list. And sadly, the people are dying.
Mm,
So many of the people who are returning are offspring of the originally dispossessed people. They are either the children or the grandchildren of those who were dispossessed. So people are angry, people are frustrated, people become emotional. Lots of promises are made all the time. The next phase that's due to be built is stage 4, which, according to what was said, should have been started. But here we are in 2025, and not a brick has been laid. No foundations have even been done.
And I think that's something that's really, really sad. And I think that the government needs to look into because, as you mentioned, people are getting old, people are passing away. And, the people returning are, the grandkids, great grandkids who might not have as much connection to District 6 as their grandparents did or as their parents did.
Exactly.
What would you like to say though, to the youth, to the young people who might be a bit disconnected, from District 6, but is ultimately their home. It's what they should be inheriting from those that came before them.
So that's a tough one because many of our kids didn't grow up with the same spirit, community spirit that we grew up with. Some of them were living not in government housing estates, in maybe a slightly better environment, don't necessarily relate to the community spirit that we've had.
Mm.
the District Six Museum asked me to do, and they came and they filmed, and we did a video clip which was reduced to 15 minutes. And the reason why I did that was like a legacy to the next generations so that they can see where we come from. Because it's very difficult for today's generation to understand that we grew up without a hot water tap,
Mm.
that we grew up without a bathroom, that we grew up without having a toilet inside the house. And that is all part of what drove me to do the video clip and to do the oral history recordings for the District Six Museum. And hopefully the next generation will take heed of that.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, and I think it's very, very important. We're going to leave it here
Yeah.
for now, Soraya. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure the message of District Six never really dies, because I think that's one of my biggest fears, that as the elders pass away and they move on to the next life.
Mhm.
The passion and the love and the willingness to fight for District 6 is going to wane away, because it's taking so long for people to return back. And as much as you have museums that, like District 6 Museum, that are archiving this, the connection just comes natural. I can just hear it in
Yeah.
your voice, how you speak so fondly of District 6, and
Mm.
you can't teach that. It needs to come natural.
No.
So
Yeah.
that's my biggest fear. Yeah.
Yeah. However, I do think people and a lot of the younger generation realize that District 6 has always been a hot potato. And in my view, it's because of the proximity to Cape Town, to the CBD.
Mm.
And that is why District 6 will probably always be in the limelight, because it's prime property. The area where I stayed in Dry Docks is even more prime because of its location. If they start developing there, it would give you the best view
Mm.
because
Mm.
it's
No,
higher up and it's closer to the mountain.
definitely. And we know that, in the eyes of others, people that look like you and I, Soraya, don't deserve, to be living, so close
E-
to the city, in such a
Exactly.
beautiful and affluent area.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly. It's absolutely true.
Mm. No, I think we're going to leave on that note, Soraya. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be chatting in the not so distant future again.
Okay. Thank you. My pleasure. Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam. That was Soraya Martheze. And yeah, she was giving us just insight on growing up in District 6 and, what the area means, for the people of Cape Town, particularly the people, who were part of those forced removals almost 59 years ago today. And as I mentioned, my fear is exactly that, it's taking a lifetime for some of these people to return back to their homes, their children, their great grandchildren might not be as passionate about District 6 as an area and the history that it has. And it's scary that the passion and the drive for the return of the land might ultimately wane off. And as she mentioned there, Soraya, that this is prime land in Cape Town, and once developments which are going to be happening start happening, it's going to be even more difficult, for people to claim rights to District 6, even though they have all the proof that when the Group Areas Act was enacted back in 1966, their ancestors, their parents and great grandparents owned the land there, and they were forcefully removed. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the next few years pan out, but very, very disappointed in our government because, as usual, everything in this country is moving at a snail's pace. I mean, having people wait 25 years or 35 years to get back their title deeds to land that they've owned for generations over is something that's very, very quite disappointing. So yeah, a lot needs to be done on that front. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, news and views continues after this.